Everything was fine until he suddenly lost his job. Then, his wife packed her things, took one of their children, and left. All that was left was the little girl who stayed behind to care for him. He began carrying blocks at a construction site, struggling to make ends meet. Just when things seemed unbearable, an unexpected event occurred. Why did his wife return when it was too late? Did he forgive her? Sit back, relax, and find out as we dive into this powerful, emotional tale. Mr. Donald was once a happy man. He lived in a beautiful apartment in Abuja. His wife, Helen, was always well-dressed, and people often said they were the perfect couple. They had 2 daughters, Sandra and little Tina. Tina, only 6 years old, was full of joy. Every evening, she would run to her father and climb onto his lap, asking, "Daddy, tell me a story," in her small voice. Mr. Donald would never say no. He would open a book, slowly reading and pointing at the pictures. Tina would laugh and clap her hands. Sometimes, she would fall asleep on his chest. He would then carry her gently to her bed, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "Good night, my little princess." Helen would watch from the doorway, smiling. To the outside world, this family seemed to have it all: love, peace, and wealth. But behind that big gate, trouble was quietly creeping in. Mr. Donald loved his family deeply and spent money to make them happy, even if it meant leaving nothing for himself. "Let them enjoy life," he would always say. One year, he took them all on a trip to Dubai. They visited beautiful places, ate delicious food, and laughed every day. He bought gold earrings for Helen, fancy clothes for Sandra, and toys for little Tina. Everyone came back happy. That night, as Mr. Donald lay in bed, he opened his wallet and smiled. Inside was a photo of Helen and the girls by a water fountain in Dubai. "That's my world," he whispered to himself. But what he didn't know was that the same wallet full of love would soon break his heart. Mr. Donald didn't just give his family money. He gave them his time and love. Every birthday at their house was like a small celebration. There were multi-layered cakes, clowns that made the children laugh, and bouncing castles in the compound. On Helen's birthday, she didn't expect anything special, but Donald had been planning a surprise for weeks. That morning, he told her, "Close your eyes. Don't open them until I say so." She smiled and covered her face with both hands. He led her outside. "Now open," he said. Helen opened her eyes and screamed. A red car stood in front of her, shining under the sun. She jumped and hugged him tightly. "Donald, oh my God, are you serious?" she exclaimed. He smiled and whispered in her ear, "You're the queen of this house. You deserve the world." Helen broke down in tears. Sandra clapped her hands. Tina danced around the car, excitedly. Later that evening, the house was filled with joy. Music played in the living room, and there were smiles everywhere. After dinner, Donald did what he always did. He helped Sandra with her schoolwork, read Tina her bedtime story, then kissed both of them on their foreheads. Kneeling beside their bed, he looked at them for a long time before closing his eyes and quietly praying, "God, please protect my girls. I can't live without them." Those were sweet days. Days of peace and smiles. But while Donald was busy loving his family, something dark was silently creeping into their lives, unseen by anyone. At work, Donald was known as the family man. His friends often asked him to go out after work. "Donald, come with us. Let's go relax and forget about work stress," they'd say. But Donald would always laugh and shake his head. "No, thank you. You guys go ahead. I just want to go home." One of them, surprised, asked, "Home again? Every day?" Donald smiled gently. "My daughters are waiting. My wife made my favorite yam porridge," he'd say. They would laugh and shake their heads. You're too soft. Your wife has you wrapped around her finger. But Donald didn't mind their jokes. To him, going home wasn't just about eating food, it was about peace, joy, and the reward for all his hard work. The next morning, Donald walked into his office as usual, greeted his secretary with a smile, and sat down. But then, the phone rang. "Mr. Donald, please come to the conference room now," the voice said. His heart started to race. When he entered the room, his boss and 3 other top staff members were seated. No one smiled. "Please sit," the boss said. Donald sat down slowly, confused. Then came the words that would change everything. "Mr. Donald, we found a problem in your department. A lot of company money is missing." Donald's eyes widened. "Sir, what do you mean?" he asked, standing up. "I don't handle the accounts directly." The room fell silent. The HR manager handed him a brown envelope. "I'm afraid we have to let you go. This is your formal termination letter. You can leave now." Donald's hand shook as he took the envelope. No one spoke. As he walked out of the building, the staff members avoided his eyes, and no one cared to hear the truth. Something was terribly wrong, and this was only the beginning. Donald returned home that evening, exhausted and broken. He didn't greet anyone. He walked straight to the bedroom and sat on the bed, still wearing his shirt and tie. The sack letter clutched in his hands, he stared at it, hoping it would somehow disappear. Moments later, he heard a loud knock at the gate. Bang, bang, bang. Helen rushed out of the kitchen. "Who's that?" she asked. Before Donald could speak, the knock came again, louder. He stood up slowly, walked outside, and opened the gate. 2 police vans were parked outside. 4 officers stepped down. One pointed at Donald. "Are you Mr. Donald?" "Yes," he replied quietly. "We're here to collect all company items in your house, including the cars." Helen ran out. "Wait, what's going on?" she asked, confused. Donald raised his hand to calm her. "Please, I'll handle this." The officers entered the compound and began checking the cars. "That's the company car," one officer said, pointing at Donald's black SUV. They opened it and started checking inside. Another officer pointed at the red car. "That one too," he said. Helen's eyes widened. "No, that car is mine. My husband gave it to me." The officer looked at her calmly. "Madam, the car was bought under a company loan. The full payment was never completed, so it still belongs to the company." Helen looked down, worry in her eyes. The officers drove both cars away. She turned to Donald, her voice trembling. "So what happens to us now? What about the children?" Donald looked down, speechless. He had no answer. The man who once gave everything now had nothing to offer. That night, after dinner, the children went to bed. The house was quiet. Donald sat beside Helen on the bed, his voice low. "Helen, the landlord called today. Our rent is due. 2 weeks have already passed. If we don't pay by then, we'll have to leave." Helen sighed but kept scrolling on her phone. Donald looked at her, his voice almost pleading. "Please, my love. Help us. Just pay the rent for now. I promise things will be okay soon." Helen turned slowly and looked at him. Then she laughed bitterly. "What are you saying, Donald? That I should use my hard-earned money to pay for this house?" She shook her head. "Never." Donald stared at Helen in shock. "I won't pay a dime," she said, her voice firm. "This is our home," he replied, "where the children sleep." Helen turned away, folding the blankets with a quick motion. "I said what I said," she snapped. "Good night." She switched off the light and left him sitting in the dark. Donald sat motionless, hands clasped together. 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks to save their home, and he was on his own. 10 days had passed, leaving only 4 days left. Sitting outside the house, Donald gazed at the sky, his body feeling lighter than ever from the stress. He had hardly spoken in days, losing weight by the hour. His daughter, Tina, joined him outside, sitting next to him and holding his hand. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked softly. Forcing a smile, Donald replied, "I'm fine, my princess." "You don't laugh with me like before," she remarked gently. Blinking quickly, Donald fought back tears. "I'm just thinking, Tina. But I'll be okay." She hugged him tightly. "Don't worry, Daddy. God will help us." He kissed her forehead, her small embrace a moment of comfort in the midst of his struggles. That morning, a new thought formed in his mind. There was one person he could still count on. Taking out his phone, he dialed Lucas, an old friend he'd once helped with millions after his shop was burned down. "Donald, my guy. Long time." Lucas answered, laughing. "I'm fine, Lucas," Donald replied, his voice heavy. "Can I come see you today?" "Of course, anytime, man," Lucas said. 2 hours later, they sat across from each other in Lucas's new office. "My friend, you're looking rough," Lucas remarked, concern crossing his face. "I won't waste your time," Donald replied, his voice strained. "I need your help. I've been struggling for months, and now my landlord is giving me 2 weeks to pay the rent, or leave." Lucas leaned back in his chair, sighing. "I feel bad for you, Donald, but right now I don't have much. I just sent funds to China for my next shipment. Things are slow." Donald's face remained calm as he stared at his friend. "But I helped you when you needed it." Lucas's frown deepened. "Business is tough. I might be able to help later, but right now I can't." Donald stood up slowly, nodding. "All right, thanks." Leaving the office, the weight of his situation felt heavier than ever. He tried calling some old colleagues, but the responses were no better. One said he had just paid his mother's hospital bills, another hadn't received his salary yet, and a third didn't even answer. The following morning, Donald woke to the sounds of frantic movement. He sat up, confused. Helen was hastily packing clothes into bags, clearly in a rush. "Tina, Sandra, get your shoes," she shouted. Donald stood, walking slowly toward the door. "Helen, what are you doing?" Helen didn't answer. She just kept throwing their children's things into a large black bag. "Helen, talk to me. What's going on?" Finally, she looked at him. "I'm going to my parents' house. I've had enough." Donald blinked, his heart sinking. "You didn't even tell me." "There's nothing to tell," she snapped. "I'm not paying the rent. I need peace." Donald stepped closer, pleading. "Please, let's talk about this. The children. The children are coming with me." Helen interrupted, packing more frantically. "They can't live like this. No light, no food, no happiness." Donald shook his head slowly. "But I'm trying. I'm doing my best." "I've done my best too, Donald. I won't stay here to suffer anymore." She zipped the last bag and turned to call the children. "Tina, Sandra, let's go." Sandra came out, already dressed, but Tina stood at the door, arms crossed. Helen frowned. "Tina, why are you standing there? Go and put on your dress." Tina shook her head slowly. "I'm not going." Helen's voice grew sharp. "What do you mean, you're not going? Are you okay?" "I want to stay with Daddy," Tina said, her voice calm but firm. Donald was taken aback, walking to his daughter and kneeling beside her. "Please, my princess, go with Mommy. There's nothing here for you." Tina looked him in the eyes. "If you're here, I want to be here too. I don't want to leave you." Donald's heart ached. He held her tightly, his voice breaking. "I love you, my child. But I don't want you to suffer." "I won't suffer, Daddy," Tina whispered. Helen scoffed, raising her voice. "So this is what you've been teaching her behind my back?" "No," Donald said quickly, his eyes pleading. "I asked her to go with you." Helen sneered. "Fine. Stay here with your father. Let hunger deal with you." She grabbed Sandra's hand and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Donald bent down and hugged Tina, his tears falling freely. "No matter what happens, I will make sure you never go to bed hungry." Tina wrapped her arms around him. "I believe you, Daddy." The next day, Donald was sweeping the sitting room when a knock came at the door. He paused, wondering who it could be. "Who's that?" he asked, but there was no answer. He stood up and walked to the door, opening it cautiously. A man stood there, holding a brown envelope. "Are you Mr. Donald?" the man asked. Donald nodded. "Take," the man said, handing him the envelope before turning and leaving quickly. Confused, Donald closed the door and sat down, opening the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. As he read the first line, his heart dropped. It was a divorce paper from Helen. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Helen, why?" He dropped the paper, his hands clutching his head in despair. His world felt like it was crumbling, and now even his wife was gone. The following morning, Donald stood in the sitting room, the emptiness of his life surrounding him. No job, no money, and only 2 days left before the landlord's deadline. He looked around at the few possessions left, his TV, fridge, and furniture. Later that afternoon, he opened a free ad website and posted photos of the items, desperately hoping someone would buy them. The caption read, "Urgent sale. Working TV, fridge, and chairs. Buyer needed today." Within 2 hours, his phone rang. "Good afternoon, sir. I saw your ad. Are the items still available?" the man asked. "Yes," Donald replied quickly. "Everything's in good condition." The man agreed to come by that evening. By 5:30 p.m., he arrived in a van, dressed neatly and looking serious. After inspecting the items, he nodded with approval. "These are in great condition. You took good care of them." "I just need to sell them urgently," Donald explained. "No problem," the man said, pulling out his phone. "Give me your account number." Donald recited the number, and the man transferred 740,000 naira, showing him the confirmation. "Payment done," the man said, before calling his driver to load the items. As the van drove off, Donald stood by the door, watching them leave. For the first time in a long while, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. Later that night, Donald went to a nearby supermarket to buy some beverages. He picked up a tin of milk, a tin of malted chocolate drink, bread, and a bottle of water. At the counter, he handed the cashier his ATM card. She inserted it, tried again, and then tried once more. "Sir, it's saying insufficient funds," she said. Donald frowned. "Try again. There should be 746,000 naira in that account." She tried again. Same result. Donald quickly opened his banking app on his phone and checked the balance. His eyes widened. There was only 6,000 naira left, his last money. The transfer had been fake. His legs felt weak as he walked out of the supermarket in silence. He sat on the pavement outside, staring blankly at the road, his hands trembling. Then it hit him. He had been scammed. Everything he owned was gone, and the only thing left was pain. As he sat there, holding his head, shaking with despair, people passed by without noticing him. Then, someone stopped. "Mr. Donald," a voice said. He looked up slowly. It was Tayo, his old mechanic, the man who used to service his car when things were still good. "Tayo," Donald said weakly. "My brother, what happened to you?" Tayo asked, bending down beside him. Donald didn't speak right away. He took a deep breath and started. "It all started when I lost my job," he said quietly. "Things went downhill from there. I couldn't pay bills. I tried to fix things. I tried everything." He paused. "My wife left with one of my daughters. She sent me divorce papers. The landlord gave me 2 weeks to pay rent, and now only 2 days are left. I have nowhere to go with my little girl." Tayo's mouth opened slightly, and he placed his hand on his head. "Ah, Donald, you've suffered all this in such a short time?" he asked, his face full of shock. Donald nodded slowly. His eyes were red. His voice was low. "I even sold my TV, fridge, and chairs. The man who came sent me a fake alert. He stole everything. I have nothing left." Tayo sat beside him on the pavement, silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "There's an old house my father left for me in a remote part of the city. There's a small room in that house that's still decent. If you don't mind, you and your daughter can stay there. Just manage until things get better." Donald's eyes widened. "You mean it, Tayo?" Tayo nodded. "It's not much, but at least you'll have a roof over your head. You can rest and think clearly." Tears filled Donald's eyes as he held Tayo's hand. Thank you, my brother. You don't know what this means to me." Tayo patted his shoulder. "Don't worry. I'll take you there tomorrow." For the first time in many days, Donald breathed deeply. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. It was hope. At home, the house was silent. No fridge, no TV, no furniture, just an empty space. Donald sat on the floor, his back against the wall. His daughter, Tina, came and sat beside him. She looked at him. His eyes were tired. His shirt was damp with sweat. He hadn't eaten since morning. "Daddy," she said softly. Donald looked at her, then held her tiny hand. "My child, I don't think I can do this anymore," he said slowly. "There's no money, no food. The house my friend promised me is in a crowded part of the city. It's not a safe place for you. You may have to go stay with your mommy." Tina looked up. "No, Daddy. I don't want to go," she said. Donald blinked. "But there's nothing here, Tina. You need a proper place to sleep." Tina held his hand tighter. "Daddy, I'm not leaving you. Everything will be fine. I believe in you." Donald felt something stir inside his chest. He looked at his daughter. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. Smiling in the middle of nothing. He pulled her close and hugged her tightly. In that moment, Donald didn't feel like a failure. He felt like a father again. Even if the world had turned its back on him, his daughter hadn't. And that gave him the strength to keep going. The next morning, Donald stood outside with a big suitcase. Tina stood beside him, holding her backpack. She looked up at him. "Daddy, are we going far?" Donald smiled slightly. "Not too far, my baby. Just a new place to stay." Soon, Tayo's car stopped in front of them. He rolled down the window. "Let's go," Tayo said. "The house isn't much, but at least you'll sleep in peace." Donald helped Tina into the back seat and sat beside Tayo in the front. As they drove, Donald looked around. The area looked poor. Old houses, broken fences, rusty roofs. Finally, they stopped in front of a small compound with cracked walls. Donald helped Tina out, and they entered the compound. The house had 2 rooms. One was locked, the other was empty with just a small mat on the floor. Donald stood in the middle of the room, quiet, looking around. No fan, no lights, just silence. Later that afternoon, Donald sat on a small wooden bench outside the house. Tayo was beside him, sipping water from a bottle. Donald turned to him. "Tayo, let me ask you something," he said. Tayo looked up. "Why did you help me like this? You didn't have to." Tayo smiled quietly. "Remember 4 years ago, when I told you I didn't have enough money to pay for my workshop rent after paying my mother's hospital bill?" Donald nodded slowly. Tayo continued. "You paid the rent in full for me, and you didn't even ask me to pay it back." Donald's eyes grew wet. Tayo looked at him and said, "You're a good man, Mr. Donald. You don't deserve what's happening to you now, but I believe God is preparing something better for you." Donald wiped his eyes. "Thank you, Tayo," he said softly. "Thank you for remembering." Tayo stood up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest, my brother. You're not alone. Better days will come." That evening, Donald sat outside and picked up his phone. He dialed a number. "Hello," the landlord answered. "Good evening, sir," Donald said quietly. "I just wanted to let you know I've moved out." There was silence for a few seconds. "All right," the landlord replied. "Good luck." Donald ended the call and stared at the sky. His new life had started. He had nothing, but he still had hope. By the next day, word had already spread in the neighborhood. Neighbors watched as Donald swept the small front space outside the old house. A woman selling bean cakes by the roadside whispered to her friend, "This man doesn't look like someone who is suffering." Another man passing by said, "Look at how neat he is. Are you sure he belongs in this place?" Donald heard the whispers but said nothing. He just kept sweeping. He wasn't there to explain himself to anyone. He was there for peace, for his daughter. Inside, Tina was folding her clothes carefully. She arranged her books on a small stool near the window. There was no table, no chair, but there was still light in her eyes. She was with her daddy, and that was enough for her. Later that morning, Donald walked inside. He sat beside Tina on the floor and gently held her hand. "Tina," he said, I need to go out and look for work. Tina turned to him with a little smile. Okay, Daddy. Will you stay with Uncle Tayo while I go? Tina shook her head. No, Daddy. I'll stay here. I'll read my books and wait for you. Donald looked at her for a long time. You're very brave, he said. Tina nodded. Because you're my daddy. Donald hugged her tight. He closed his eyes as he held her. Thank you, my princess, he said softly. Then he stood up, looked around the small room, and smiled for the first time in days. He was starting from zero, but as long as he had this little girl by his side, he was already rich. The sun was hot that morning when Donald walked into a construction site. His shoes were dusty, and sweat covered his forehead. He looked around and saw men lifting blocks, carrying sand, and mixing cement. He took a deep breath and walked up to one of the workers. Good morning, Donald said, wiping his face. Please, I need work. The man looked him over. You need work? You with this neat shirt and clean hands? I'm serious, Donald replied. The man laughed and shook his head. This place isn't for fine people like you. We do hard work here. I'm ready, Donald said, his voice low but firm. Please, I just need something to do. The man pointed toward the scaffolding. Go talk to the site boss. If he agrees, then you're lucky. Donald nodded and walked slowly toward the sound of shouting and hammering. He reached the base of the building, looking up. The site boss stood on a wooden platform, shouting orders. Hey, you! What do you want? The boss yelled, pointing at Donald. I need work, sir, Donald replied. The boss stared at him. You want to lift blocks like this? Donald looked down at his shirt. Without a word, he turned it inside out and put it back on. I'll do anything, he said. Please, I just want to work. The boss looked at him for a moment. Then he smiled and said, Okay, 7,000 naira per day. If you want the job, start now. Go and carry blocks. Donald nodded. Thank you, sir. He walked straight to the pile of blocks and bent down. His back ached, and his palms hurt, but he didn't stop. This was the first step to fighting back, and he was ready to fight. Every single day, Donald went to the construction site. He carried heavy blocks, mixed sand and cement under the hot sun. His back hurt. His hands were sore. But he never stopped. He never complained. He just kept working. When people asked him why he was always quiet, he smiled and said, I'm doing this for my daughter. That was the truth. Tina was the reason he was still standing. When his body felt weak, he thought about the fact that Tina needed to go back to school. When his eyes were full of sweat, he remembered how she held his hand and said, Daddy, I believe in you. And that gave him strength. That night, the house was quiet. Tina had gone to bed early, but Donald couldn't sleep. He sat in a corner, resting his back against the wall. He looked tired. His eyes were open, but he wasn't really looking at anything. He was thinking too much. Suddenly, Tina opened her eyes. She looked at her dad. Daddy, she said softly. Why are you not sleeping? Donald looked up quickly and forced a smile. I'm fine, he said. I'm just resting my legs. Tina sat up. Daddy, I know life is hard right now, she said. But I'm proud of you, and I know things will get better. Donald held her hand tight. He didn't say anything, but in his heart, he made a promise. He would never give up. Not for himself, but for her. The next day, at the construction site, Donald was carrying blocks when a big black SUV drove in. Everyone stopped and looked. A woman stepped out. She wore gold earrings and high heels. Her dress was long and clean. One of the workers whispered, "That's the madam. She owns this place." The woman looked around, then pointed at Donald. "You," she said. "Call that man for me." Donald dropped the block he was carrying and walked over slowly, wiping sweat from his face. When he reached her, she looked him over. "Why are you doing this kind of work?" she asked. Donald stood straight. I need the job. I have a daughter to feed." She looked surprised. "You don't look like a laborer." "I wasn't," Donald replied.